Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for this opportunity to teach. Mazel Tov to all those celebrating transitions, special occasions. I wanted to look at the book of Esther, Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther. We don't always get a chance to study it, and so that's what I wanted to do today. I'll begin with a brief introduction since it's such an awesomely fun book. First of all, it's rated R, so all of my 6th and 7th graders, cover up your ears for the next 2 minutes. It is full of humor. It is written as a farce, although there's obviously deep historical connections in it. Beyond the humor, it's a little bit of Game of Thrones, but a kind of absurd version of it. There's tons of partying. It kind of starts with a weekend at Bernie's situation. There's tons of drinking, 180 days, despite a 7-day public party. The king's heart is always merry with wine. And it's pretty much a full banquet with a lot of intrigue in the Persian capital. Interesting for the connection this week. There's a lot of, what's the word I can use? Yeah, there is that. And a lot of, people getting together, shall we say. And just a lot of objectification of women. We have Vashti, who's told just to wear her crown and come out. The rabbis say nothing else. She refuses, so we have a strong feminist response, but it ends up with a 1-year beauty pageant where women are clearly objectified. Each one gets to spend a night with the king. Anyway, it's a line that's full of a lot of innuendo. We have the king holding out his scepter and all kinds of things that are happening. It's also really violent and gory. We have Haman building the gallows to hang Mordechai. In the end, he gets executed on the same gallows. We have all of these, a decree to wipe out the entire Jewish people. And then, of course, at the end, we have terrible violence against the people of Shushan. Hard to read it, hard to take it in. The only way I can read it and connect to it is the absurdity of it. The Jews had no power. They certainly wouldn't engage in that point. And hard to think about now that there is Jewish power to look at this text without a sense of warning. We've seen extremists like Baruch Goldstein in 1993 use this as a pretext for violence against Muslims. Other fun things, though, are the names. The names are totally funny. Esther is related to the name Ishtar, right? A Mesopotamian goddess or star, which if you're going to write a story about a Jewish heroine, you're not expecting a Mesopotamian goddess. What about Mordechai? Marduk, right? The chief Babylonian deity, our Jewish superhero. What's going on? Haman also is a divine name in certain cultures. But of course, under all of this is a very, very serious message of anti-Semitism. This is a work of clearly historical fiction, but the historical experience is real. When was this written? We're not exactly sure. Sometime probably between the year 450 till about 200 before the Common Era, and probably a more ancient story that dates back to that 5th century before the Common Era that gets written down like many of our texts and edited until it comes into the form that we have probably in that 2nd century before the Common Era at the latest. It's written probably, most certainly, in the land of Persia, in modern-day Iran. And you can see that through the late Hebrew and the Persian words that are borrowed from that language that gives us a sense of what's going on here. Is there anti-Semitism at the time? Yes, right? We have people who are different. You see the description of the Jews. Right at the beginning of the Megillah, that Haman uses, right, there is a people that is different from us, and they are living among us, right? There are these people who have come into our land, right, and they make us angry, right, to have strangers among us, to have these immigrants who are not the overall population. And the Jews are treated as such. They are treated, they are despised, they are hated. There is a clear pattern of anti-Semitism here, and it's just mind-boggling to think that we're sitting here 2,400 years later in a world where anti-Semitism is rising, is more and more public. This week I sat in a meeting of our Lexington United Against Anti-Semitism organization, Fran Jacobs, who launched it, many members of Amunah who were involved, and you hear absurd things. We have an internet which can throw out just unbelievable anti-Semitism. Someone posts something, and then it goes off on a wild chain of hatred. And not just, of course, against Jews. We see it against women. We see it against blacks. We see it against other minorities. We see it against the LGBTQ population. But I'll give one moment that just struck me so hard as one of the people in that organization. And by the way, we should be so thankful that we have in organizations of Christians and Jews, including there were two reverends, Reverend Barbara Callahan from Hancock Church, hosted by Reverend Rabbi Jerash of Pilgrim Congregational Church, right, who are active in this fight against anti-Semitism. And I pray it becomes a model in other places, and it also lays the foundation for us to do other work together to bring our people and traditions together to fight. But Megillat Esther is about anti-Semitism, and one of the stories that one of the parents shared this week was of her son who's an 8th grader. And so he's on a WhatsApp group. Apparently you can get added to these WhatsApp groups, you can become part of them, you can be thrown off, it can be used in really not nice ways, and it can also be used to bring someone in. What took place on his WhatsApp group was a picture. This is a picture of what was posted in his WhatsApp group. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, I'll walk around with a picture, but it's a sneaker that has a swastika on it. Can you see this? A blue sticker, a blue sneaker, and the sneaker has the Nazi symbol, and the caption is, "When you want to finish a race quickly." And what was most, I think, powerful about seeing this is that no one responds and say, "Hey, this isn't right." Not one of the 75 members of her son's WhatsApp group said a word. Not a word. Not a funny joke. So let's take a look at our text. I believe they've gone around. And I'm going to read some of chapter 4. And let's take a look and see what we can find and what is the connection to this moment. Esther is a book that feels very connected to this moment. First of all, it's a modern book where God isn't controlling the action. God is never mentioned. But it's about human agency. Let's take a look at that. I'll read a little bit in English. I don't have a lot of time, so we'll go a little faster. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, end of chapter 3, right? Haman has made this decree. It's being approved by the king to destroy the entire Jewish people. He learned what's happened. He tore his clothes. That is what we do when we learn of death or a decree of death. It is a mourning. He goes into mourning. He puts on sackcloth and ashes. He went through the city crying out loudly and bitterly. And we knew this was a pattern and something done in funerals for years. In the Talmud, it actually is like you hire people to cry and scream out at funerals. It's an unusual job. But in any case, until he came to in front of the palace gate, for one could not enter the palace gate wearing sackcloth. Also, in every province that the king's command and decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and everybody lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and informed her, the queen was greatly agitated. She sent clothing for Mordecai to wear so he could take off his sackcloth, but he refused. Thereupon Esther summoned Hathach, one of the eunuchs whom the king had appointed to serve her, and sent him to Mordecai to learn the why and wherefore of it all. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square in front of the palace gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and about the money that Haman had offered to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him the written text of the law that had been proclaimed in Shushan for their destruction. He bade him show it to Esther and inform her and charge her to go to the king and to appeal to him and to plead with him for her people. When Hathach came and delivered Mordecai's message to Esther, Esther told Hathach to take back to Mordecai the following reply: all the king's courtiers and the people of the king's provinces know that if any person, man or woman, enters the king's presence in the inner court without having been summoned, there is but one law for him, that he be put to death. Only if the king extends the golden scepter to him that he may live. Now I have not been summoned to visit the king for the last 30 days. Is she going to risk her life and go against this law to have a conversation to save the Jewish people? When Mordecai was told what Esther had said, he had this message delivered to her. Al tidmi b'nafshech limalet beit hamelech mikol haYehudim. Do not imagine of all the Jews that you will escape for your life by being in the king's palace. Right? He tells her, forget about yourself. Don't think you're going to be saved if this decree is passed. Kim, this is the key verse, I think, of the Megillah, and what I want to discuss today. Kim hacharesh tacharishi ba'et hazot rebach ve'atzalcha yamod le'Yehudim mimakom acher ve'at u'veit avich tovedu ומי יודע אם לעת הזאת הגעת למלכות. On the contrary, he's telling her, if you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows? Perhaps you have attained to royal position for such a crisis. What does Esther do? Upon hearing Mordecai's strong words, she says, okay, go and assemble all the Jews and live in Shushan and fast on my behalf, because she's going to go and violate this law. Don't eat or drink, and I will observe the same fast. Then I will go to the king, though it's contrary to the law. V'im avadati v'chasher avadati. And if I am to perish, I shall perish. So Mordecai goes about the city and does just as Esther commanded him. So my question is, anything strike you about this, especially in this verse, in the last three verses that I put on page 2, about what is happening? What is Mordecai saying? And what is Esther's response? We're going to have a long conversation, but we'll have a mini conversation. Whoever goes first, you're the winner. Who wants to say a word about what Mordecai says? Yeah, excellent.
One of the things I find most interesting about those two sentences is Mordecai is confident of redemption in some form. That he's basically telling Esther, well, if you don't do it, somebody else will, and it will be to your and your family's loss. But he's confident that God will somehow save the Jews.
One of the big questions is, where does that salvation come? Where does Mordecai have the confidence? Is he introducing God into the narrative? We've been saved before, somehow we'll be saved. Maybe not all of us will be saved, right, because of what he says, but maybe some of us. Or maybe he feels like we're going to get someone else to do your job. Unclear. Something else about Mordecai or Esther's response. What else does Mordecai say that's kind of... thinking of that, the end of that verse. What does he say there? Ki la'et hazot ulai yigaret lemachut. Right? Yeah, Joan. Okay. Maybe you've been chosen. Think about Moshe or someone else in Jewish history. You've been chosen, you've been given an opportunity to save the Jewish people. It's a very striking phrase, right? Ulai, right? Perhaps, right? Lo, where is it? Right, miodera, who knows if this is the reason that you have come to have an opportunity for saving. I'm very struck by this line, miodera, right? Who knows if you've been given a chance to save the Jewish people? And I think it's a line that's both resonating thousands of years ago, and it's also a line that really stands out, right? Who is going to stand up? Perhaps you have the opportunity to do something, to make a change in history. Mike, a final comment.
It seems to be talking in a wider context that every one of us has the responsibility to stand up for what's right.
That's, I think, the way that a lot of people have read it through Jewish history, that if you have the opportunity to do something, it's not a maybe, not an option, then you have to stand up. It could be for our people, it could be for someone else. And while we don't have a long time to get into a longer discussion, I'll invite you to do that at Kiddush, to think about what are the ways that you want to stand up. But I'll invite us to the passage on the back from the Talmud, which says it very clearly, right? It says, I don't have it, but it's from the Gemara in Shabbat 54, and it says that responsibility, right, begins with the home, the city, and the world. And there's kind of a proportion to the capacity of what it's discussing. I'm sorry I don't have it, but you have it, so you can read it. And in that, right, how you go and act in a certain moment. And I think Judaism, right, is protesting both not only against the actual thing that needs to be stood up against, but as something that happens to us. We get resigned to something. We think that we can't do anything. And I think in the end, what Mordechai is saying, we are all agents of action. We all have the potential to do something. And our action, our mood, our sense of hopefulness is what can actually change the day. Apply it to so many different moments in your life. The Gemara, I read the Gemara in Yivamot, the next text on the sheet, right? I read that Gemara to say, right, it is a mitzvah to say even when it's not going to be heard. Right? Sometimes people tell me, what's the point in doing something? No one's going to hear me anyway. And here the Gemara says, actually, we speak out. We speak even when it's not going to land, if you will, and necessarily make the biggest difference. We speak out even when it may not be heard. And then the last one of the most powerful phrases in the Talmud that you have at the bottom, right? Shtika kehodah dami. But silence is acquiescence. And so I'll invite you to think about, where can your voice be heard? Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's in work. Maybe it's in your own town institution. Maybe it's against that kind of sneaker that I just showed you. Maybe it's for democracy and values that are threatened in our own country. Maybe it's against this law that is being pushed forward in Israel against us as Jews who believe in egalitarianism. Find the place where you can raise your voice. Silence is not neutral. And so I want to close with the fact that what Esther does is a very clever move. The first thing that she says to Mordechai, okay, I'm going to take this risk, but I need someone behind me. I need a community. Go and assemble the entire community. When we go forward and stand up for something, right, if we feel that we've been given the opportunity, like Esther, to actually make a difference, we cannot do it unless we feel that there are people behind us, right? She's telling us that courage is really hard alone, in a solitary sense. But it's when you gather together, here by fasting, by calling, by spiritual resolve. We've just heard this moment where Esther is summoned to save the Jewish people. Mordechai doesn't say you're the only hope, right? As Lou pointed out, right? Lou said that you're not the only hope. There can be relief and rescue that come from somewhere else. But you have to decide if you're going to be a part of that. She gathers all the Jews. She crosses the threshold very boldly. Im avadati, avadati. If I'm going to die in this mission, then I will perish. Struck me very much like some of the words of Hannah Senesh, a young woman, right, who parachutes during World War II to save the Jewish people. Obviously a terribly failed mission, but has this sense of purpose and mission. I think Purim can remind us to take risks. Purim can remind us to protect and sustain, to organize, to donate, to show up, to pray. We may all have different roles. We all might have different pieces of the missions that are most compelling to us. But to be active, we need each other in the different ways that we can. So I invite us to choose Esther's ways, to not scatter, but to gather. This is a time where the Jewish people surely need each other, where we surely need as many friends as we can find in the world. And so who knows if we have come to this moment in history, this moment for our people with purpose. And so in Esther's spirit, let's say no to that isolation, to that cynicism that can paralyze and destroy hope. Let's say no to a silence that can shrink our souls. Let's say yes to community that can stand up and show up together. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Purim Sameach.